coming in off the farm, and nobody knew much about the trials. So when we walked in that first time into Nuremberg, where those 24 seated so-called criminals were seated, I was just amazed. You mean those are the guys responsible for killing over 10 million people? Yeah. Norbert and I looked at them, and they were real close. Goering always sat on the end here, from Goering, and he was second in line to Hitler. And so anyway, that evening we had an orientation of what our duties were going to be. And the sergeant was Sergeant Stedham, and he was telling what we'd have to do here. They already had a number of the Fraulein's typing. There were about 20 of them were behind us, 3 or 4 rows of them. And I turned around once, and this one was going like this, and I said, "Hey, Norbert, I think there's one back there likes me." And I looked again. Anyway, the colonel was observing this too. There was a colonel there. So when he got up to talk, he said, "Now, gentlemen, there'll be no fraternizing with the Frauleins. 9, no fraternizing with the Frauleins." And I raised my hand, and I just never done. "Yeah, soldiers, stand up." So I stood up there, and he stood about this much taller than I am. I said, "Sir, how do they enforce that, and what are the consequences?" "Well, I'll tell you, young man, smart asses like you," he said, "probably get 30 days solitary, and I might start it tonight." And I sat down. She wanted me to tell how I found out, how I was first indoctrinated. No, there were 200,000 affidavits, testimonials. The trials took 300 and some actual, 218, I think, actual trial days. Went from November 45 to November 46. And there were 360 witnesses. There was about 1,000 in all involved of military with the Nuremberg trials. And we were 3rd Army, which was at the American zone. There's the English zone, the French zone, the Soviet zone, American. And so we were near Munich. Out of that toll set was by Dachau. So then we did work with testimonials, typing testimonial affidavits after they came through the trials. And then we got to see a lot of the trials. And then the data, these 200,000 affidavits had to be typed. And that's the kind of typewriter we used. It wasn't those electric, You'd go along, hit the end there, and bang, and you swing her back again. And if you made a mistake, you had to erase about 10, 4 or 5 different carbon copies were in there. And I wasn't very fast at it. I shuffled papers more than anything. But as the data, we had a teletype service. We were a signal operations battalion. And that teletype would relate to other companies and battalions within the American zone, what was going on at the trials. So you heard it all day long. And now, with the American Civil Liberties Union, this came, you read it, this came to me about a year or so ago. And all I told them, I wouldn't use their name, but I'd say it was an education source, a school source. And this is what it stated. And this is proved to be, so I sent on this same paper, I sent this week to the Civil Liberties Union here in Minnesota, this copy. And it just states right out here, "I've been asked to inquire as regards my presentation in public schools. Would you sue my sponsors, American Legion and Knights of Columbus? Would you sue me? Will you sue the school?" And since this ACLU objected to my mention of God and prayer in public schools, I've not had any requests from the public schools for 2 years. I normally was doing about 12 to 15 a year. I do about 30 a year I was doing total. But that went to the organizations, jails, prisons, schools, colleges, organizations and whatnot. But this has really fell off. So there are a number, like Tony said, well, why don't you leave that up to some of the other people to do? And bigger lawyers and organizations. And we have some that are doing it. They're objecting to the stand that the UCLA is interpreting the separation of church and state in a state where you can't say anything about God in a public building or school. But like Norm Hansen, he's their commander. And he said, but they're not doing it around here. There isn't anybody around here that's been there before, been to the trial. And this is a powerful letter. He said, you should send it around. So I did send this week to Michelle Michelle Bachman, right? Yeah, she's our woman congressman, and she's on our side on this. But we got a lot of people that aren't, and that's why I associate this first part of my presentation by saying out here that and down here was some of the first data that we typed was when Hitler and the Nazis took control, was to get God and prayer out of schools, and that's what we're doing right now.
That's unfortunately what is happening.
Yeah.
So
And
when you go talk, Larry, you share what you heard and what you saw through all
that's what
your
I do.
typing.
This right here, yeah. And then I use overhead projectors, transparencies, to emphasize different points.
Do they ask a lot of questions?
Huh?
Do they ask a lot of questions?
There isn't too much. I'd always leave 10 minutes or so. The one that had the most questions probably would have been, you were at that one with the ROTC at the St. Cloud State, Atwood?
Yeah, they had a lot of the cadets there, the ROTC.
ROTC, about 100 cadets. Yeah.
What happened to all the transcripts? Are those available? Are they public record?
I'm assuming they are, somewhere. They were part of the trial. Yeah.
Something would take a lot of digging.
Well, I'm sure it's available.
200,000 is a whole lot.
200,000 different affidavits.
How many typists did you have?
Well, there was 1,000 in all of military, but that included all the guards. Well, there were approximate 20 in our group, but I think we had 4 other groups, signal corps within that American zone. I don't really know how many. I would estimate that there might have been 100 or more.
And you were the best.
No, I wasn't. I didn't type very good. When I put on my MOS when the Army, they ask you, well, what are you qualified for? Well, you come right out of school. You haven't qualified for very much. And somebody said that you ought to cut down that you were a typist, get a clerk's job. Sounds good to me. So I put down I was the expert typewriter, but I also put down 42 words a minute. That was on my record. Well, 42 words isn't very fast by any standard, but I didn't figure those guys would see that, didn't know the difference. So I didn't lie, I wasn't, except I said expert. See, they got different names for your speed that you could type. Expert would be the fastest.
But you said expert and 42 words.
I qualified at 42 words, yeah.
And he only took typing because his mother asked him to. Your mother told him
Yeah,
to
that's
take
another
typing.
story. We could take up typing in the school. I think we had 14 or 15 typewriters. And my mother said, now Lawrence, she never called me Larry. Well, nobody was called their short names. It was either Philip, Francis, Bernard, or Lawrence. Now Lawrence, you take up typing. Oh, Mama, I don't want to take up typing. Only girls do typing. No, you'll never be sorry. Your brothers all took typing and they've used it. Now, this is back in the early 40s. And no, I said, I'm not going to be a secretary. Anyway, the typing class had 14 girls in it and had 1 boy.
That'd be you.
Yeah. And I rather enjoyed it, you know.
So you followed your mother's advice and you took typing.
There was no denying I'd do that. that wouldn't disobey.
So somebody, when you were doing these transcripts, someone was interrogating or asking the questions of the witnesses?
Yeah.
And you were
We were
typing
just
it?
typing what was said. It came from a master copy. And we had to have, the copy machines they had, those deers weren't very good. Keep them about a month and they go yellow on. You just wasn't perfected yet for copies.
So they had it typed and then you would type it again?
Mm-hmm. You had to have many copies.
And so you
And some of it was done in German, of course, and it had to be interpreted. Some of it was English, some was French, Russian. So we just typed what was sent to us.
And where were the trials held? What?
Well, the Nuremberg, Nuremberg was pretty well bombed out. But the only real standing building in Nuremberg was the palace. It hadn't been hit. And that had a lot of different rooms. And the first thing when I went in there, what it reminded me of, if you look at this picture, there was a fence around those guys. Sort of bordered around. And you walk in there, it was sort of like a sales barn. It kind of reminded me of a sales barn when you had the cattle all down and the hogs in the middle and sitting around. And these guys, though, they all had interpreters. These interpreters for the 4 different languages would be seated around here. And the trials, we didn't do anything directly at the trial. The only thing I did there was I saw it. Mm-hmm. And then Norbert was Norbert, Norman, and me. And Norbert came from Loose Creek, Missouri, and Norbert could speak fluent German. So whenever we'd go to take a jeep and go to Nuremberg, I made sure that I got along with Norbert. And I could say, Norbert, what'd they say? What'd he say? What'd he say? Norbert would be interpreting my interpreter. He was pretty good at it.
And the outcome of the trial was they were all?
There were 12 convicted, and that was on October 1st, 1945, 46, that they were condemned to hang. And of those 12, one had died already. Out of the 24 that sat here, there were, and then Goering took a poison pill. Next to Hitler, this guy, he took a poison pill before. Nobody knows how he ever got that pill. Like one of the guards must have done it. And anyway, and I was, they were to die on the 16th of October, and we weren't allowed to go in there where they did that. But the guy that did the hanging was Hangman Joe Malta. And I got to know him during the trials, Joe Malta. He hung 60 in all, the different Nazis. And wherever Joe would, like if you had a beer afterward at the canteen, if Joe came in there, he drew a crowd right away. They'd all want to hear the latest that Joe hung on. What are you doing?
Oh, what a terrible job.
But it was I had an article written here just around Scarborough. Wrote a pretty good article on it. And I was including that article that went in the paper to some of them that I'm going to be sending this to, a witness to history. I'll give it to you. I got it upstairs.
Yeah, please. I'd like to see it. And at the time, you probably didn't. Did you have any sense of the idea of the historic significance
I
of
really
what you were
didn't.
doing?
I never even talked about it so much. I didn't think it was anything. Everybody knew all about it, but they didn't. And it never got where I thought would it be something of interest. And about 15 years ago, I decided to tell a story. Started with I went watching TV, and there were 2 instructors from a public, I don't know if it was school or college or what it was, and one was telling the other, there wasn't much difference over there in Germany than there was where America locked up the West Coast Jews, the West Coast Japanese, the West Coast Japanese. And I thought, my gosh, I haven't heard of a single one in the West Coast getting put to death, and we had millions and millions over in Germany. Are they teaching our kids that now? So I went to the college, got her name, charged to have Holocaust and Genocide Studies Group, Marion something. And I told her what I heard on TV, and she said, "Oh, that's not unusual. A lot of people don't believe it even happened." Oh
Yeah.
my God. Well, they do. Now she said, "Why don't you come to a meeting that we're going to have on such and such a day at the auditorium in the St. Cloud State? Tell your story." Well, the person there had to one I was already telling her about this. So that was the first one that it had,
That's
was
how
at
it got
St. Cloud
started.
State. That started them, yeah. Then I got requests to come for others. And it's been quite an education, because even today you get people that just can't believe that ever happened.
The World War II?
Yeah, the Holocaust and the killing of all those Jews in all those
Yeah, all
camps.
those. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
awful.
I've heard, people that don't believe it.
Yeah.
How can you not believe that?
Tell them you got an uncle that was there, and you can give them that
So-
one there. I'll get that other article.
Okay.